Hello, I'm Heather Darch, and this is a presentation by the Quebec Anglophone Heritage Network. In this series called Raising Spirits, we're in Quebec's Laurentians, looking for stories about Quebec's disappearing heritage. Places of meaning and memory can disappear from bustling communities. Buildings and locations that once held importance to a town, that helped to anchor it and provide meaning, are now gone in the name of progress. These well-known places in their day reflected how people lived, worked, and interacted with one another. They speak to a life now gone, even though the town remains. This is Sainte-Agathe-des-Monts.
I was born and raised in Sainte-Agathe. Went to school here. It was a magical place. I was very fortunate to have been able to experience this. Hello, my name is Ilene Geringer-Smith, and as well you can see, I am standing in front of the most beautiful lake in the Laurentians. This is Lac des Sables. This is what Sainte-Agathe was built on. It runs 12 miles round, and it is just the center of everything. My grandfather came from Ireland and managed to find his way to Sainte-Agathe-des-Monts, where he bought a little place that he called Levine's Lodge. He was the actual taxi driver for Sainte-Agathe with his team of horses. And he bought Levine's Lodge, which gradually became Colonial Inn. My parents were Miriam and Abe Geringer. They came to live here in 1960 after my grandparents perished. They took over the hotel. The Colonial Inn started to flourish. It was outstanding. It was a beautiful little 36-room inn with cute little rooms, magnificent dining room, excellent food, beautiful beach, and great guests. People would come from all over. We lived in the hotel, so therefore the chef and the chambermaids and the handyman and everybody took care of us because my parents didn't have time. And we just used to check in and say, we're here. And they'd go, okay, fine, see you later, Gator. And we'd just do our own thing. We went to school in Sainte-Agathe, we'd walk to the school. And after school, we had after-school activities. Having a boat was not new. We all had boats. I'd go to the village to go shopping and I'd hop in my boat. And I would park myself down at the municipal dock and I'd go pick up stuff for the hotel or myself and then hop back in the boat and go back to the house or the hotel. There was about 11 hotels. Sainte-Agathe was a going concern. It was an absolute mecca for people from all over Montreal and upper state New York and Vermont. Sainte-Agathe was like the Catskills of the Laurentians. Well, life around the lake, you had a lot of homes, obviously, around the lake, but the hotels had entertainment. So people would come and they would go for the entertainment. Most of the hotels had nightlife entertainment. The food was always very important to a lot of the hotels. The ski hill, the summer camps, the lake. The whole thing revolves around the lake. Lac des Sables, everything revolved around the lake. The area around Sainte-Agathe was quite famous for some of the finest children's summer camps. You had Camp Hiawatha, you had Camp Pine Valley, Pembina, B'nai B'rith, you had Pripsteins, Powders. You had many different camps that would house anywhere from 300 to 400 children per summer, from 6 years old right through to their counselor ages. The parents would come up and stay and rent rooms in all the hotels around. These camps would run 8 weeks in the summer. Plus you had the Y Country camps. The Y Country camps housed maybe 400 children, but they would split in two, where kids would come up for 4-week sessions. I was a Hiawatha girl.
My name is Joseph Graham. I'm an historian with a particular passion for this part of the Laurentians and broader areas. One of the fascinating things about our area is it had two major vocations. One was tuberculosis treatment, which was major, and the other one was vacation place, summer camps and hotels. Many of the summer camps were a function of the hotels because the family needed the kids looked after. They didn't want to have a holiday and had to look after the kids as well. And you see all kinds of fascinating stories about the summer camps and the hotels. A lot of that history happened from early on, from the original arrival of the train to basically the 1950s when things began to change. And that's more of a period of popular history, and there's a lot of interesting stuff there, exciting stuff that others can explore with you. But as my dear Sheila always says, that I don't remember anything unless it happened 75 years ago or more. So you're stuck with me on the older history of the hotels. The old hotels began in Sainte-Agathe, in Valmorin. The first one was in Sainte-Agathe-des-Monts, which was the Grey Rocks Hotel. And that was a major hotel very early on. Sainte-Agathe boasted huge hotels that accommodated generally specific communities. So you had an English-speaking, a Yiddish-speaking, a kosher kitchen. You had all these different facets of hotellerie that began. And it grew right across this whole area. That was the vocation of Sainte-Agathe at that time. Those hotels were getting their clientele from people who were coming to visit family at the Mount Sinai Hospital. And if you look carefully at the hotels around the Sainte-Agathe area, you'll find quite a number of them had that basic market of people coming to visit their families at the Sands, whether it's Sainte-Agathe or here.
The heyday would have been in the late 50s, 1950s, early 1960s, and beginning of 1970, before they built the highways coming in from Montreal. Before that, you had the Route 11, and that would take you, but it would take you through all the towns to get to where you were going. So it took a long time to get to Sainte-Agathe, and sometimes it would take 2 hours. Yes, we had the train, and that was something. My granddad used to go with his sleighs, and he used to pick up the skiers, and they'd all sit in the back under bear rugs, and everybody had their skis in their hand, and they would go to the different hotels. That was quite magical.
One of the aspects that was driving that whole movement was the skiing. You had the lakes in the summer, and you had the skiing in the winter.
Well, Mont Sainte-Agathe developed by a family in Sainte-Agathe that brought the ski hill to life. There were quite a few ski hills around. You had Mont Castor, but the main stronghold was Mont Sainte-Agathe. And Mont Sainte-Agathe brought a lot of people. But then after that, you know, people started graduating, going north and going to the bigger mountains, let's say.
When the auto route came in, and when the train became less important, people would come out for the day, for the weekend, but they wouldn't come out for a holiday the same way. So those same people who came for the hotels and for tuberculosis treatment for their families started buying properties here. And a lot of the staff that worked at those hospitals actually bought country properties and stayed on as country property owners. And the hotels slowly faded, and Sainte-Agathe's vocation became more service. Mont-Tremblant's became more hotel.
I think the tourist mecca is now revolving around Mont-Tremblant for the Laurentians. It's the mountain, it's everything that goes with it. The town was built afterwards, and they made it into a sweet cachet. Sainte-Agathe lost its cachet because the highway went right over Sainte-Agathe. And in going and doing that, what's happened now is the big box stores came in, and it took away from all the little stores, and the little stores all closed up.
The arrival of the auto route and the major roads, the diminishment of the train, the cure to tuberculosis, sent Sainte-Agathe into a tailspin. Sheila and I discovered in our explorations, we went to Saranac Lake, which we encouraged Sainte-Agathe to twin with because there were so many similarities. And one of the first questions they asked us in Saranac Lake is, how did you deal with the economic collapse? They had the same problems. They had all the same problems. It was fascinating, even to the point of both were saving the railroad stations at the same time. It's an endlessly long list. Sainte-Agathe went into a long period of, if you want, turmoil. There was friction in the town. There was different groups that didn't get along. It was a difficult period from the 50s on. And what eventually happened is people began to deplore any viable future for Sainte-Agathe. It looked like it was down and out again. It was just going to be a nothing place when it once was the most important place in the Laurentians for visitors, for healthcare and so on. But then they began to see things. The town just pulled itself up by the bootstraps and decided that it would create itself as a central service area for residential homes, for the hospital, for all the things that people need, shopping and so on. And so today you have condos coming out of our ears. I mean, there's a huge number of them. There's a lot of huge population growth in Sainte-Agathe because of that. The values have gone up. A lot of sad stories of people being pushed out of their apartments because they weren't paying enough rent, that kind of thing.
It hurts me to come back here to see what is developed. It's turned into a town that's lost its cachet, it's lost its history, it's lost its nostalgic way it used to be. And now what you have is mega money that has come in here and just keep building and building and building. It's not helping the town other than taxes, because these people do not come to the village to spend their money. They'll go elsewhere. So the little stores have all closed up.
Having lived through those periods in Sainte-Agathe, I have very mixed feelings about where it is today. When we closed our office in Sainte-Agathe for retirement, it wasn't Sainte-Agathe who reached out to us, even though we had founded committees, we had been very, very involved. It was Val David. They reached out to us right away and wanted to involve us. Sainte-Agathe seemed to forget about us. And I see it now as part of that spiral, that downward spiral. I have one side of me that is delighted to see that it's picking itself up, another side not wanting to see what they're doing. But I don't live in Sainte-Agathe. I live outside of it. And I barely go into Sainte-Agathe anymore, so it doesn't really affect me. It's just, again, this is progress, and you have to accept that this is the way we're organized.
You need to remember what this was, for one simple reason that you're never going to get it back, but the people have to learn and understand what we had because it was magical. The people were magical. You could walk as a child. I could walk to the village. Other parents would say, going to the village? Okay. Everybody would look out for you. Other families, other parents would look out for you. Your parents would look out for them. If after school, there was no after school daycare. Everybody looked after each other's kids. You knew everybody in town. There was a lot of harmony, and that harmony went away.